Good evening, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to ask you three simple questions. The first question is, have you ever found yourself reading the same sentence in a book over and over again because your mind was miles away? Second question is, have you ever been at a meeting or social gathering and found yourself thinking of something else as someone was speaking to you, perhaps right now? Thirdly, have you ever been at a social gathering when you got embarrassed because you forgot the name of someone to whom you'd been introduced just seconds earlier? Well, if you answered yes to any of these questions, you've experienced loss of concentration, and I can help. If you answered yes to all of them, I'm afraid there's absolutely nothing I can do. You're too far gone. All joking apart, concentration is the topic I'd like to address for the next few minutes, and I'd like to explore what it is, whether it's possible to lose concentration, and how we can actually study it scientifically. For psychologists, concentration is probably best regarded as the ability to focus on what's most important, the task at hand, while ignoring distractions. And we regard concentration as a little bit like a mental spotlight that we shine at things we're interested in. But unlike any spotlight that's yet been invented, our mental spotlight can shine inwards. And when it does, it often picks up distractions that can be quite damaging. And that's exactly what happened to the golfer Doug Sanders, who in 1970 faced a small putt to win the British Open Championship. It was less than a metre, and he missed. But the reason he missed was because he said afterwards, "I was wondering which section of the crowd I should bow to." Now, Doug Sanders lost an estimated $10 million because of that miss. And that concentration lapse has gone down in history as one of the costliest ever. But the point about the spotlight is that you can't actually lose concentration because your mental spotlight has to be shining somewhere. And therefore, we need in psychology ways of exploring and capturing exactly where your spotlight is shining. Now, one way of measuring and exploring concentration is through capturing its spotlight through eye tracking. Eye tracking is simply the computerized measurement of people's eye movements as they look at objects. And I have an eye tracking lab in UCD, and in it we can record the sequence and duration and pattern of people's eye movements as they gaze at things. Now, looking isn't always the same as seeing, but we can establish exactly where people look. Now, the reason that's interesting for us is because it gives us a tool for exploring the minds of experts, people who have exceptional skills or knowledge. And we've discovered some unusual things. For example, if you look at top tennis players, it's remarkable how they can return balls that are hit at them of speeds of up to 250 kilometers an hour. This is faster than it's perceptually possible to track. And when you ask these people like Nadal or Andy Murray, how they achieved this remarkable feat, they'll say, "I was looking at the ball." The one thing we know from eye tracking research is they were not looking at the ball. So yet another example of don't believe an expert. They don't know what they're doing. And it's true that in this case, they're not looking at the ball, but eye tracking can tell us exactly what they are looking at. And what they're looking at is signals from their opponent about events that are likely to happen in the future. And from those signals, they anticipate what's going to happen next. In that sense, although sport is played with the body, it's won in the mind, in the knowledge of what's going to happen next from pattern recognition. Now, I've spoken about tracking the mental spotlight externally, but what happens when you shine it internally? That enters the world of imagination. Now, our imagination is the ability to see and feel sensations, even though the objects which give rise to them are not standing immediately in front of us. And I'm interested in one aspect of imagination, which is called mental rehearsal or mental practice. Mental practice is simply the term for seeing and feeling an action in your mind's eye before you do it. For example, rehearsing an important phone call or a meeting or preparing a talk that you're about to give. Now, mental rehearsal turns out to have amazing practical applications. And over the past 20 years or so, my colleagues and I have examined some of the facts about mental practice. One of those facts is that mental practice, when combined and alternated with physical practice, enhances performance. And we've applied that fact in the last few years to work we've done with Imperial College in London, where we've actually helped to train laparoscopic surgeons using mental practice and shown experimentally that they learn skills quicker and more efficiently than do surgeons trained in the traditional instructional methods. So mental practice works. The mystery is why. And now I turn for a few minutes just to quickly look at some answers to that mystery. One answer is that neuroscientific research has shown that some of the same brain circuits are activated by imagination as are activated in actual skill execution. In other words, there's an overlap of brain processes between imagination and action. Now, that imagination-action overlap gives rise to an important discovery, and that is imagined actions should take about the same length of time as actual actions. And by measuring the duration of actual and imagined actions, we can discover interesting things like people who have neurological problems have a strong mismatch between their estimated and actual length of time for doing things, whereas expert athletes have almost millisecond precision about the congruence of their physical and imagined time. So we now have a way of measuring motor imagery or mental practice using experimental methods. And just to finish, we've seen the difference between looking with your eyes, seeing with your mind, and imagining with your mind's eye. And before I finish, I'll just go back to one of the concentration problems I started with. If you have a difficulty in remembering people's names when you meet them socially, the one thing to do is to hear the name properly. We don't usually do that. And one way of doing that is by repeating the person's name or asking them to sound it themselves by saying, "That's a nice name, how do you spell it?" The only problem is, if their name is T-O-M or M-A-R-Y, they'll have great delight in telling you that, and they'll never forget you for asking, which is what I call the reverse memory effect. Thank you.